The fluorescent lights above hummed, cold and clinical, the kind that exposes every nervous twitch and sweat line on skin. I sat at the end of a battered wooden table, a cheap blue folder clutched in my hands. The committee sprawled in front of me. Dr. Vargas interlaced her bony fingers, Dr. Salinas balanced his chin upon one hand, and Professor Cuevas shuffled a mountain of paperwork. I felt like a bug under their magnifying glass. Vargas spoke first. Sophia, we've thoroughly reviewed your proposal for an AI-based rural education assistant. Let's be honest here. This is ambitious, unrealistic even. You don't have the resources, and the technology's not where you think it is. She pursed her lips, waiting for me to argue. My heart tumbled in my chest, but I had rehearsed every answer, mapped out every risk, poured every hour I didn't have into this project. But if we don't start testing these ideas now, someone else will, and they won't think of. Salinas cut me off. This is Mexico, Sophia, not Silicon Valley. You need to be realistic about our context, your background, your limitations. Behind his words, I heard the skepticism. People like you aren't supposed to dream of this. I left the room with nothing, just a signature on a rejection letter and the silent stares of my classmates through the glass wall. I could almost feel the criticisms and whispers brushing at my neck as I walked outside. Behind the smog-blurred university gates, the city pulsed, indifferent. Home was a squat building in Iztapalapa, its walls painted in lemon yellow and periwinkle. Inside, the scent of frijoles simmered and radios cracked out cumbia in the courtyards. My mother was at the sink, combing suds from a bowl. The moment I stepped in, my father asked about the committee. They said it's too much. That it's something for Americans, not people like us. I hated how my voice trembled. He dropped his gaze to his palm, calloused from years as a mechanic. Pues mija, maybe they have a point. So many people here have to settle for less. My brother Diego snorted from over his phone. Maybe aim for a regular job, Sophie. Not everyone's meant to build robots and change the world. Their words sat heavy, gentle enough to sound like concern, but sharp around the edges. At dinner, my aunts and uncles arrived, crowding our table, passing around tortillas and advice. Why so stubborn, niña? Nobody gets rich from computers here. I heard about your grand idea. Didn't they try that in Monterrey and fail? The laughter was 1,000 small knives. My only defiance was silence. I held their doubts in my chest, a ball of ice refusing to thaw. On weekends, I sat before my aging Dell laptop. The screen lit my face until dawn. I watched videos, read open source code, joined online forums under a false name. My English was halting, but I forced myself to listen, to type, to beg for help from strangers across the world. The city would grow quiet, except for the distant hum of cars and an occasional dog barking. And I'd be there, trying over and over to make my little AI chatbot answer questions in Spanish that made sense. My friends distanced themselves. Jessica, who used to come over to swap telenovela spoilers, told me, "You don't know when to give up, hermana. Why torture yourself?" Some nights I lay awake, staring at the shape of my future hovering above the ceiling, afraid my family was right. I had never met an engineer in person, never stepped on a plane, never owned more than 2 pairs of shoes. What right did I have to think I could change things? But then I'd think of all the children sharing cramped, sweltering classrooms in the rural hills outside the city. Some had barely enough teachers, some none at all. Their faces haunted me, dark eyes, shy grins against the impossible, because they were my cousins, my neighbors, younger versions of myself. I had to try. Every rejection, every family gathering, my dream was the punchline. I, Sophia, and her talking computer. Let us know when your robot makes tortillas. Maybe then it'll be useful. One winter, I found an online scholarship, remote learning, AI development. Free for underrepresented backgrounds. I applied, and 3 months later, to my absolute disbelief, I was accepted. The stipend paid for our internet bill, just enough to keep me online. My father's only comment, "You could have found work by now, Sophie." The online course was tougher than any class at the university. Sometimes my internet would cut out mid-lecture. I'd have to run to the OXXO to recharge data with borrowed coins. I failed my first module. Piecing together code that wouldn't run. I started over, hands shaking, but after months of all-nighters, coffee, and despair, something clicked. My code ran. My chatbot, named LITA, Little Teacher, asked questions, corrected mistakes, explained math in plain language. The first time I saw her answer a question in Spanish without garbling the syntax, I sobbed so hard I woke my mother. It wasn't much, but it was real. The years crawled forward. My family grew tired of mocking. They just ignored me. At dinners, they'd nudge Diego about his job at the phone store, ask about my cousin Sarita's boyfriend, but skip right over me. I accepted it, let myself blur into the wallpaper, a ghost with code-stained hands. A year after my chatbot worked, I sent an email to a big education nonprofit in Oaxaca. 2 weeks of silence. Then a reply. "Can we schedule a call?" That call changed everything. They gave me a tiny grant. Enough to fix my laptop, just enough to buy a server from a friend of a friend who owed me a favor. I trained Lita on lessons borrowed from kind teachers, packed her virtual brain with as much Spanish, Mazatec, and Mixtec as I could scrap together. Sometimes I'd stay up listening to children's voices crackle over WhatsApp, testing her. Their giggles stuck with me, delighted, skeptical, delighted again. No one in my neighborhood noticed. My family's life rolled on. Mom's arthritis grew worse. Dad grumbled at broken engines. Diego got engaged. Each Sunday, our block tuned into football, faces painted in hope and sweat. I was a shrinking shadow, scurrying between moments. But then, 2 years after the committee's rejection, I got a call while waiting in line at the market. "We want to scale your project. UNICEF wants to sponsor pilots in 5 states. Are you available for a meeting?" I nearly dropped my eggs on the floor. Contracts arrived, stamped with strange blue sigils. My bank account filled in neat transactional staccatos, enough to pay my debts, enough to let my father retire from the mechanic shop, enough to get my mother new joints for her legs. It felt like someone else's life. 1 year later, Lita was running in remote classrooms. I visited a handful. Dusty, sun-baked villages, leaning schools ringed with battered chain-link fences. I watched as children clustered around battered tablets, their brown fingers tapping in questions, grins blooming as Lita greeted them in their own tongue. Teachers sent videos, children giggling, singing back the answers, playing math games with my creation. News stories followed, reporters leaning in, microphones shining. By the time Global Networks reached out, I moved out of my parents' apartment into a quieter flat. I sent money home every month. My mother called only when the neighbors asked what I was doing, always careful to couch her pride in jokes. Even so, in Iztapalapa, I still felt like a story nobody read. Then came a letter from the university. Would I return as a guest speaker to celebrate prominent alumni, inventors, and digital pioneers? My own committee, Vargas, Salinas, Cuevas, signed the invitation. I hesitated for weeks. My stomach roiled whenever I imagined the old campus, the glass-walled room. The bored faces. My father tipped his glass one night and said, "You should show them, Sophie. Not for them, for yourself." He looked at me with something raw, apology maybe, or memory. So on a bright Saturday, I rode the battered metro, the orange cars shimmering with heat, all the way to Universidad Nacional. I wore the only suit I owned, hands sweating within my pockets. The campus looked unchanged. Jacaranda blossoms purpled the walks, students sprawled in study. Vending stalls hawked quesadillas and spicy mangoes. For a moment, I was the old me again, shivering outside big doors. In the grand auditorium, faces packed the seats. Professors clustered at the edges in their subtle armor-listless blazers, half smiles. My old committee sat front row. Several of my former classmates lounged together. Jessica was among them. Now an office manager with a toddler on her lap. I looked at all of them, the entire assembly of voices who had doubted, mocked, dismissed. The host cleared his throat, running down a list of polite accolades for the other speakers, before calling my name. There was scattered applause, mostly polite, tinged with curiosity. I stepped to the podium. The microphone whined as I adjusted it down. My hands trembled not with fear, but with the old anger, the old longing. "Thank you," I said. I was once told my dream was too much for this place, this country, this face. I paused. No one moved. I wanted to show you what happens when you refuse to shrink, even when people ask you to. Please, allow me. I pulled out my tablet and linked it to the projector. The screen illuminated behind me. A video call. The auditorium, so proud in its silence, filled now with children's voices booming through the speakers. The first scene? A sun-drenched classroom. Rows of students huddled around a shared tablet. The teacher, a young woman in traditional dress, guided them. LITA's friendly voice, tinged with perfect Spanish, greeted a girl named Maribel. "Hola Maribel, ¿cómo te ayudo hoy?" Maribel, small and gap-toothed, stared shyly at the device. "¿Cómo se dice future en Mazateco y español, Lita?" And Lita responded, first in Spanish, then in crisp Mazatec, her voice as warm as pan dulce. The children cheered. The footage cut to rural Chiapas. A barefoot boy recited a story to Lita, receiving gentle, funny corrections. In another clip, a teacher wiped tears as her students, for the first time, solved division problems unassisted. Their faces were hope made visible. I let the footage play. My old professors didn't blink. Vargas's hands tightened into fists. Salinas leaned back, eyes narrowing. In the crowd, my family, tucked into a back row, watched mute, their faces reflecting the screen's blue light. When the video ended, I stood silent, breath held, letting the hush settle. No applause yet, not until I finished. I built this in the same little apartment I grew up in. I was told it was ridiculous. Maybe it was. But right now, thousands of children are learning in their own language from a tool built by someone who looks like them, who comes from where they do. Not because I am a genius or different or better, but because I would not give in. I let my eyes find my mother, her face wet with tears, then my father, shoulders held high. Diego shifted in his seat, a crooked smile on his lips. Behind them, some nodded, some looked away. The applause cracked first like a small fire, hesitant, then hungry growing. Loud, loud enough to fill the halls, to echo down the cold corridors where I had walked so many afternoons, shamed. It filled me too. Afterwards, the professors approached with stiff congratulations. Practiced handshakes. It was